Okay, our video here, our sixth video for Chapter 3, Scatterplots and Correlation. All right, we're going to talk about regression towards mediocrity in hereditary stature, right? Also known as reversion to the mean or regression to the mean. Okay, now this scatterplot's a famous scatterplot, super famous, right? And the scatterplot shows the relationship between a father's height in inches and his, there should be an S there, his adult son's height in inches for 41 father-son pairs in a data set from Sir Francis Galton. Okay, Sir Francis Galton actually wrote this paper. He was just kind of checking out statistically fathers and sons and wives and daughters and fathers and daughters and wives and sons and looking at these pairings and look to see what type of relationship is there. Okay, so you can read more about that at the websites right over here. The JSTOR website you need to have access to if you want access to the original document and not have to worry about how it's changing. The UCLA website has a link to the text. That's a very interesting text to read. All right, but here we are talking about Sir Francis Galton and these heights. All right, so what percent of the 7 tall fathers had shorter sons? Well, how do we read this? Well, it tells us that we've got this line y equals x, right? Boom, there's y equals x, and vertical lines separating fathers into 3 groups based on their height. So short, moderate, tall, we'll say. Okay, so what we see is the 7 tall fathers were in this group, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there are my 7 tall fathers. Well, how many of them had shorter sons? Well, this line y equals x would mean son and father were the same height. So that means that only 2 of the fathers were taller than their sons, right? Or excuse me, only 2 of the fathers were shorter than their sons, excuse me. So that means that here, all of these, the fathers were taller than their sons, right? That the fathers were 6 whatever, and the sons were less than 6 whatever, 6 foot whatever, right? So what percent of the 7 tall fathers had shorter sons? We would have the total of 7, and 5 of the 7 had shorter sons. You can put that in your calculator, and you say, hey, that is about 71.4%. Okay. What about the short fathers, right? So here are my short fathers, everything to the left of that vertical line. Okay. And what percent of the 9 had taller sons, right? No, one short father had a son that was the same height, right? So that son was the same height. So that means that those 3 sons were not taller than their fathers. So what percent of short fathers had taller sons? That would be that I have 6 out of the 9, or about 66.7%. Okay. Well, what's that telling me? Right, that of these tall fathers, about 70% of them had sons that kind of were a little shorter than them. And of these short fathers, almost 70% of them, 2/3 of them, had sons that ended up being taller, right? And this paper by Sir Francis Galton goes in to describe this reversion, this regression towards mediocrity in hereditary stature, which is just really saying, hey, you know, whatever the mean height is, people, plants, biology tends to go towards whatever that mean is. Okay? Now, what is this regression to the mean? How do we answer that question? Well, the way we would answer what is regression to the mean, we can think of our situation here, that these tall fathers were having tall sons, but not quite as tall on average. And these short fathers were having short sons, but not quite as short on Right? And so really the regression to the mean is that these values of y, these values of the response variable, right, regress toward the mean. And it's important to note that if there is a weak correlation, this regression to the mean is more prominent, right? So if there is the less correlation there is between some variables, then the response variable reverting to and moving in the direction of the mean of the response variable is more common. Okay, so quick reading of graphs. If you have questions, please make sure you ask for clarification. Make sure you're staying on top of all of your work.